Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Learning Engineering Podcast. I'm Dr. Scotty Craig, your host. I'm joined today by my student and co-host, Siyun Lee.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your co-host, Mei. I go by Mei. I'm a PhD candidate in human system engineering working with Scotty at Arizona State University. And currently, I'm also working as a design intern at University Design Institute at ASU. Today, we have a fantastic guest, Brittany Robinson, joining us, and I can't wait to get to know her and dive into her experience in learning engineering.
And thank you for joining us today, Brittany. I'm very excited to have you here on the show.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I'm really excited. So again, as they mentioned, my name is Brittany Robinson. I am currently a funded graduate assistant at Asbury University, where I am majoring in instructional design as my master's. And my current research includes things like equitable distance learning, micro-credentialing, and digital badge certifications as interventions in higher education.
That's exciting. There's actually a lot that really could be done with that whole idea of digital badge stuff. And so I'm really excited to hear that you're working in that. Before I get off track, I would like to start, though, by asking you about what areas that you come to learning engineering from. I'm specifically focusing on your training and expertise within learning engineering.
Absolutely. So my day job in the industry before I got into higher education was I was an instructional designer, learning experience designer, and e-learning strategist. And I actually specialized in code boot camps and non-tech to tech apprenticeship programs. And I actually started out in the tech industry myself. So I had this very non-linear, multi-domain journey into this new emerging industry of learning engineering. So I started out as a web developer, a user experience and user interface designer, and I was actually behind the computer writing the code and working alongside software engineers in these fast-paced, agile environments in industry. And I kind of transitioned into this field completely by accident. I lived in the Midwest at the time, and I helped Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio launch their first Coder Dojos, which for those who aren't as familiar with the tech field, Coder Dojo is a grassroots community organization that teaches programming skills to young people. So through these volunteer projects of just teaching other people how to code, I fell in love with teaching, and I fell in love specifically with teaching non-technical people how to create those mental models and how to scaffold that information so that they could learn these highly technical topics. And that's kind of how I started my transition. Not too long after that, my husband and I moved overseas, and we lived in Australia and New Zealand for a while. And that was my first exposure to micro-credentials and to this idea of stackable digital badge certifications. So in New Zealand, I actually lived in a flat above the Mind Lab, which is part of Academy X, and they do coding camps for youth, but they also do postgraduate certificates for adults, and they are certified at a national level. So after getting that experience and that exposure, of course, when I came back to the United States, the first thing I did was enroll in a micro-credential program myself, see what that experience was like as a learner. And that's continued into my graduate work, getting my bachelor's and my master's in instructional design, and now helping Asbury build their own micro-credential and digital badge certification program. So even though it was maybe not a linear progression or journey into this field, I think that all of my prior experiences from tech have actually added up to get me exactly where I need to be. So I'm really excited to see learning engineering pulling all of these best practices from human-centered design and user experience design and what we already do in tech, pulling them in to these practices for education as well.
Yeah, that's really great. That's one thing I've been hearing from a lot of our guests. Nobody's really coming from like one area. We've all kind of dabbled in different places. One follow-up question I have for you here is that how did you actually learn about learning engineering? Can you remember when you first learned about it?
Yep, actually, thank you for that question. That's a great question. When I went to Asbury University, the Learning Engineering Toolkit is actually required reading for all people in the instructional design program at Asbury. So that was how I first became exposed to this concept. Dr. Lisa Jones, which I'm Dr. Jones's graduate assistant, She is a member of Icicle. She attends the meetings and she encouraged all of her students to start attending. So I actually became a member, as Maymay is, with the Students and Grads SIG. So I've been trying to attend as many months as I can and just learn from the brilliant minds that are part of that group, and buying the books, reading the books, and just doing whatever I can to immerse myself into this field.
That's really amazing, and I'm actually really excited to hear that it's required reading. The Learning Engineering Toolkit is required reading there. So I had to actually set up a class and get students to take it before I can make it a required class, a required reading.
Oh, wow.
But that is really great that you're using the Learning Engineering Toolkit there, and that actually what brought you into this larger area. What areas of learning engineering are you most involved with within the society?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say most of the work that I've done, especially these past 3 years, as many of us have been doing, has been a lot of e-learning strategy and taking in-person synchronous learning experiences and converting them into remote and, quite frankly, a lot of the times blended or asynchronous experiences. I do a lot of coding. I also have a background in video game development, so I pull some of that gamification in. I'm certified in gamification as well. So just kind of taking a lot of in-person, face-to-face, looking at what learning sciences make the most sense and using the learning sciences to inform the modalities from the entire spectrum of online learning modalities that we end up using. And then I let that inform the technology. I don't know if that answers your question, Dr. Craig.
Actually, that's a wonderful answer. So now let's shift gears a little bit, even though you've talked about several different projects, potential great projects already. But is there one specific learning engineering project that you want to talk to our audience more about?
Yeah, I think a really good example of a learning engineering project in the real world is a learner data dashboard that I had the opportunity to help create as part of a learning engineering team for a Fortune 500 enterprise client. And this client had moved from completely face-to-face synchronous to blended learning using a bit of e-learning as well. And this was, of course, for a tech apprenticeship program, which is what I specialized in when I was in industry. And we utilized a lot of adult learning theory. We took a flipped classroom approach with some pre-work, which was asynchronous and very self-directed. And then when we came into the classroom, we had a lot of active learning with that guidance from the instructor as well as the peer interaction. And as we were building that course, we actually used action mapping to make sure that everything was set up properly for those learners to build the mental models that they needed. The entire setup, though, for this dashboard actually came from research that was being done at Carnegie Mellon and the Pittsburgh Science of Learning Center. And we looked at some of their recommendations for best practices when you create dashboards for learners. And specifically, our goal was to scale this program. The program was already serving thousands of students per year. We wanted to scale it even bigger at a global level. And we needed a way to be able to see how the learners were performing at a glance so that we could go in and make interventions on the fly in real time if we needed to. And some of the science that actually came out of Carnegie Mellon and Pittsburgh, the Science of Learning Center, some of the research that they did showed that it can be really helpful if your dashboard has red, yellow, green learner statuses so that you can quickly see who needs that intervention and go in immediately and help that person. So that helped us quickly identify where people might be struggling and where people might be exceeding and not struggling. We also conducted a lot of user research. We did a lot of design thinking, and we formed a small team which consisted of subject matter experts, mentors, learners. We had a couple instructional designers and learning experience designers, directors of learning. And then because we were building a dashboard, we also needed engineers. So we needed people who knew the back end technically, could write the code, knew how to use Tableau and Visual Studio and things like that. So we pulled in a couple data engineers, software engineers, and then one user interface and user experience designer to make sure that it all looked good aesthetically for the users. And we were able to really rapidly prototype with a team that size. And of course, not all organizations have the budget or the human resources to have such a robust learning engineering team, but we were very lucky. We had a massive budget and were able to rapidly prototype Our first prototype, I will be honest with you, was just in Microsoft Excel. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to even be that impressive looking. It's more important to just get something out there that you can put in front of people and start testing. So that's what we did. We had Microsoft Excel. We stored everything on SharePoint. We had automatically color-coded fields that were based on math in Excel, and it was that simple. And then for our second iteration, after we tested with users and we got some of that feedback and some of that data, we were able to pull in the data engineers and start pulling that into Tableau, and they started doing some of their magic on the back end to make it, well, first of all, to transition away from Microsoft Excel and to make it more robust. The next iteration that they're working on is actually Experience API. So XAPI, they've got some software engineers and a director of learning who are coming in, and I'm really excited to hear how this goes as they start implementing that. I think that's going to give them even more of an ability to drill down deeper with that data and get a lot more useful feedback in terms of helping those learners.
That is an absolutely amazing example of a learning engineering project. It has all of the different major disciplines and knowledge from all those different disciplines that you would expect for a good learning engineering project. Thank you for going into that iterative process. And one of my favorite things that you said, that first round, it doesn't have to be perfect. If you just did it in Excel, that was amazing, because it's true, like your first drafts do not have to be done. You don't have to wait. As soon as you can get something, ideas in a form that you can get in front of people to get more data to see if it's actually going to start working, you should do that. And the fact that you pulled in best practices from the learning sciences, from the Pittsburgh Science for Learning Center, PSLC, and ended all the way up with good data science using reliable data standards for data, such as XAPI, going from the very beginning to closing the loop at the end, to implementing really good policy. I think that's actually, hopefully, will be an amazing project. I mean, it sounds like an amazing project that can be very beneficial to the learners.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been going really well. It had, I think last time I checked, it had exceeded KPIs, those key performance indicators. And I really think it was a combination of that team. We had that multi-domain expertise on the team, and then also just pulling in the learning sciences made such a huge difference. You don't have to know everything yourself. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can use what is already known and just draw upon that.
Yes. And that is true. And that's the good thing about having, like, knowing that it's out there is usually half the fight. Now, from that process, any lessons learned, either from that process or from your training previously, outside of that, that you think that would be good for our audience to know about? Maybe if they're just starting out in learning engineering, what do you wish you would have known then?
Like I said earlier, you don't have to know all the answers. It's okay to admit that you don't have all the answers, and you actually are a stronger learning engineering team if you're willing to admit that and seek out those people who have that expertise so that they can help inform the team. So that was one of the things that we did right. We were able to reach out to so many different types of people who were really, really good at what they do, and pull in their expertise. I would also expand that to say that when you start implementing, sometimes those implementations don't immediately give you the data points that you need to make those decisions. And it's okay to admit that too. So if your implementation didn't go as planned, or you didn't have enough data to answer the how might we question, it's okay to do another round of implementation and collect more data or different data and then try it again. And that's part of just trusting this iterative process that we use. Another thing that I would really encourage people to do is to test your assumptions. Learners are not a monolith. They are individual people. They are whole humans. And it's really important to, if you have an assumption about the learner, find a way to test that. Be very human-centered. We use a lot of user-centered design approaches in industry, and I would say let's do that as well in learning engineering. So we talk in Learning Engineering Toolkit about learner personas, empathy maps, learning journey maps. We used all of those things throughout this process to make sure that we always had that learner's needs in mind. If you can, pull in some actual learners. If you've got access to actually talk to the people who are going to be taking this course and let them see what you're working on, even when we had just our little Excel spreadsheet prototype, we pulled in people and let them look at it and got their feedback, and then that helped us refine it and make it better. So I would say those are probably the two most important things, and just trusting the learning engineering process. It is flexible enough to adapt to different institutions. You don't have to do it in a certain order. You can adapt it to what you need, but just using it, following it, and trusting that it will get you the results that you're looking for. It's a very good process.
Thank you for that. That's better than I could ever say it myself. So, but I wanted to point out, especially reiterate your point on getting user data, even if it's not a lot of user data. It is so important and so helpful to just be able to get, like you said, even if you just get a few in the beginning, to involve your participants, that target audience, those stakeholders, to get them like actually there looking eyes on your product. It can save you many hours, days, months of retooling later.
Oh, I love that. That's eloquently, beautifully put about the learning engineering process. When you mentioned the project that you learned, you mentioned several times about the team formation, like a multidisciplinary team members. That's part of the why the learning engineering works, because it's a team effort, it's team sports. So I guess my question for you is, what do you observe or about this specific project, and then how you formed a functional team and an effective team? Is there any lesson learned or like observation you have over there you can share with us and then the audience?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. With this type of a project, it is a massive undertaking. So it's something that, especially given the timeline, we had a rapid timeline. It's a fast-paced, agile environment. You're working in sprints in industry, and it just would not have been possible if it was just one person trying to do this on their own. I had to very quickly be humble enough to say that, yes, even though I might have been a user experience designer 10 years ago and I might know how to code, I don't have the recent engineering expertise that some of my colleagues will have. So it was really important for me to take a step back and invite other people in. I will say again, though, that when it came to team formation, we were so fortunate because we had a very large budget in the field that we worked in. This company was massive. They could pull in, if you needed expertise in any specific area. If you think about the flower diagram for learning engineering, we had all of the petals covered. So we could pull in whoever we needed, data engineers, software engineers, UX, UI designers, and money was no issue. We didn't have that constraint. Most of the time, I would say, maybe not most of the time, but a lot of the time, organizations are going to have human resources. They're going to have constraints. They're going to have budget constraints for sure. So I think it's important to do what you can with the team that you have, and to be willing to even reach out to your colleagues or do some research. Don't just assume that you have all of the skills that it takes, and don't try to be a learning engineering team of one. I think that's a trap. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess a mini follow-up question on that, because you said everybody came with different background. For you, like when you have both, you have coding, you have this technical background, also you have this instructional design background, and then maybe other secret skills that you have over there. And then I also wonder, how do you decide it personally? How do you decide to, I'm going to let someone take over that side of work, even though I know how to do it? Those mentorship, like how do you decide which role you take on this stuff to help the whole team move forward faster?
That is such a good question. Thank you for asking that question. I think when you're on a small team, if it's a small learning engineering team or a small team engaging in the practice of learning engineering, sometimes that is when you do have to bring in those other skills. So that's a situation where I probably would have had to be the UX UI designer and the coder and the instructional designer and the learning experience designer. I was fortunate on this team, though, that we had those other resources, and we had a phenomenal UX UI designer who her skills are much more recent than mine are. Like I said, mine was 10 years ago. Technology changes so rapidly that it just didn't make sense for me to be that role when we had someone else who is recent and currently doing the work and is very, very good at what she does. Same thing with, with the data. I don't know the first thing about data engineering, never used Tableau, could not even tell you, but we were very fortunate to have people who that's all they do 40 hours a week. That's their job, and we could pull them in. So it just made a lot of sense intuitively. We had those resources, and I knew that my skill set and my time for that project was limited and would be best served by me diving into the resources, doing the research, pulling in the learning sciences. Because, for instance, my technical colleagues who were engineers, they probably were not, I'm going to say most likely 90% were not as familiar with the research Carnegie Mellon has done or the research that's being done in Pittsburgh about learning sciences, cognitive sciences. That's where my role comes in. And so because I could trust them to write the code and to do everything on the back end as far as engineering, I freed up my time to be able to dive into that research. And I think that trust in your team is really critical to pulling these projects together and making sure that they're successful.
That's awesome. I would just do a quick 2-point summaries. 2-point summaries. One is check your ego out of the door, and the second one is trust. That's it. Okay, Scotty?
Yes. Well, that's kind of what I was about to say, in that, it's one thing about with learning engineering, there's little room for ego, and we really are working as a team. So yes, you can do a lot of things. You might have skills in different areas. And if need be, as you said, Brittany, I liked the way you said it, like if it's a smaller team, you may have to play multiple roles. But if you have somebody who is an expert, you have to let them be that expert. And even if you have some expertise in that area, you use your expertise to help with communication. And you focus on your part of the project, whatever that might be, to make it stronger. As you said, Brittany, and you took on the science of learning role to bring that in. And then you have to take what you know about the other areas to be able to effectively communicate that to them. Thank you for that. Those are actually amazing lessons and amazing things for our audience to hear. We are unfortunately at the end of our show. It's been wonderful having you. But before we leave, I want to kind of open up the floor to you. I've been asking you a lot of questions. Ask you to briefly discuss any other kind of projects or topics you haven't had a chance to talk about.
Absolutely. One of the big ones that I'm very excited about is at this year's Icicle Learning Engineering Conference, which ironically is taking place at Carnegie Mellon this year. So I'm going back to my roots there. Dr. Lisa Jones and I from Asbury will be speaking during a session at the conference on human-centered design and active learning. And we're actually pulling in a bit of digital storytelling and narrative for instructional design, which is a huge focus of Asbury's instructional design program. So I'm very, very excited to share that with the attendees this year at Icicle. Outside of that, my current work is mostly within the realm of massive online courses, and I'm doing a bit of that for American audiences in the United States as well as audiences in Africa. So it's been really interesting getting to explore learning engineering in 2 different countries at the same time. With Asbury, like I mentioned earlier, we're doing the micro-credential and digital badge program. We've just launched our first prototype to students, and so we've got them going through it right now, testing it, getting some data for the first time, and then we're going to iterate on that in the fall. And then with Africa, I'm working with a nonprofit that is scaling curriculum. They're going to have a curriculum portal that's going to span multiple countries throughout Africa, and they're going to serve rural populations. So that should hopefully, both of those projects I'm hoping will launch in 2024, serving learners through asynchronous online learning in similar but very different ways due to different learning contexts.
Those are both, amazing things. Actually, I really look forward to hearing and seeing your presentation. I will be at Icicle this year. So and I'm really excited about the conference. I think it's going to be a great conference this year. And I think your talk is going to be lots of fun to listen to. It is coming up, the Icicle conference. For those who may not know, the Icicle is the main conference that the Icicle Society, which is the Learning Engineering Society, puts together every year. It's usually in July, towards the end of July, and this year, which is 2003, it will be at Carnegie Mellon University. And next year, in 2024, we hope to be hosting it here at Arizona State University. So we're very excited about that. Brittany, it has been wonderful talking with you today. I think you have actually hit on and given them a lot of information that will be of a lot of interest and extremely useful to our audience, so thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
And I look forward to meeting you at Icicle at the conference and actually hearing more about what's coming out of your research. So thank you so much. And I would like to also thank Maymay, my co-host today. And to all of you, our listeners, I hope that you'll join us next time on the Learning Engineering Podcast.